Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
And I've been sitting here thinking about all the things you do on your turn and other people's turns, and how complicated this game can be. And sometimes you're sitting there with like some really cool cards in your hand, and you're just so excited to play them, and you play them out and somebody counters it, or you play them out and somebody wipes the board, or even on the other side, you've got counters in hand, you've got removal in hand, and you just never, like, you've got so many possibilities of when to play any given card. When do you know is the right time? And I was like, you know what? Let's stop thinking about this and make it an episode. I was like, let's just start recording. We're going to use up all our good, fresh energy. But hey, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're recording on these comfortable couch chairs.
You bet. Andy's on a recliner. He doesn't even know it.
What? I can't push it back.
You can.
You believe in me?
Hopefully I
won't. Oh my God.
There it goes.
Oh, here I am with my feet up on the table. And little did I know that I could have my feet up on the chair.
For those who are wondering, we're hanging out in my living room. Just
it was great.
You know,
still got my feet on the table.
All right. So when to play your cards?
Yeah. So I was originally thinking of it from like the big play perspective. Like, you know, you've got enough mana to play your commander and, you know, a couple win cons or whatever. Like your win con into like a big play or something. But you know that like you need another turn because you don't have a haste enabler or something. These are scenarios.
Yeah.
And you know that if you give everybody a turn, somebody, the chances are, is either going to have or find a board wipe or some way to take care of the thing you just did, undo what you just did. So I'm like, all right, then you don't want to do that. And then I'm like, oh my God, there's so many times in this game where I end up with these looping discussions with myself in my head of like, all right, do this. Wait, no, hold on a second. Do I want to do this right now? And generally my takeaway is like, just don't think about it. Just do it and get it over with. Like lure out that counter, lure out that, you know, removal, but also at the same time, like that sucks to have the, like, to have your big play ruined.
Right. And you don't necessarily, the downside of a multiplayer game is if you're playing one-on-one, then yeah, play out the card, force them to have it.
Right.
You know, do they have it? And make them play it. So it's like, here's the threat's coming at you. Can you stop it? That's easy one-on-one because the idea is you've now drawn out their counter. Great. Now you have another spell to play, and you determine your order of spells with the expectation that the first one's going to get countered. So you're not going to put your best stuff right out there, but you're going to put, you know, something that's threatening that they want to counter. Great. In multiplayer, you put it out there. Well, now there's 3 people who all have their opportunity, who can all take their shot at stopping what you're doing. Admittedly, there are that many more threats on the board. So there's a balance there, but it always feels like you're running into something. And if you're always the one who says, I'm gonna draw out the counter. Okay, great. Then your spell gets countered, but the next guy's doesn't. Don't you want to wait and let the next guy get his spell countered and then play yours? It gets a little tricky, and it also leads into a kind of play style that I don't really want to encourage in my group.
Right.
Where everybody just holds the cards, holds, constantly waiting for somebody else to do something. So then they feel like, now I have my opening, I could do something. So you're always waiting, and I don't want that.
Yeah, I like that the way that you like to play. I like that the way you want to encourage play involves not thinking too hard about who's got the counter. just do the play. If they've got the counter, they've got it. But also, like, because, like, that's how I instinctively play anyway. But also at the same time, like, if you're overthinking it, then, I mean, all they have to do is have a card in hand and 2 mana up. Like, then you're never going to play anything.
Right.
And that's one of 3 people. And they're going to learn that fast. And then all they have to do is have a card in hand and 2 mana open.
Right. I mean, the general rule of thumb for when to play your cards is as late as possible.
Right.
You always want to wait till the last second. This is just, and this is a very, obviously, a ton of exceptions to this rule. But generally speaking, you want to hold off for as long as you can. So if you're playing a creature, especially one that doesn't have haste, you want to play it on your second main phase. Because not playing it on your first means you're holding a card in hand that your opponent doesn't know what it is, and you have mana up. So they have to be thinking about what kind of a combat trick you might have.
Right.
They have to be thinking about, how they want to respond, how they want to block. And you have this air of, you don't know what I have. So you have to consider that. Whereas if you'd played that creature before combat, well, maybe then you would have, you're going to have 1 less card in hand, and you may only have 1 or 2 mana up. So suddenly the options for what you could have are dramatically reduced.
Yeah.
So
and their options are more. So, like, if they've got, removal in hand and you play your creature out first main phase, then they've got options. They can get rid of the creature you just put down, or if the creature that you were going to attack with is a bigger threat, then they can get rid of that. And, like, it's their choice at that point. Otherwise, like, you go to combat, you attack with the thing you're going to attack anyway, and then they have to decide right then if they want to take the damage and whatever effects go along with it, or kill the thing, risking that whatever you play second main phase, or if you have a combat trick, or saving the thing.
The killing the thing,
right,
is huge. When your opponents are looking at the board and attempting to determine making their threat assessment of the board, that threat assessment dramatically changes when you attack them with a creature, because that creature is now a direct threat. It's going to do X damage unless they do something. It's amazing how many players will burn their removal on that creature when, if they just stopped and thought about it for a second, they would be more concerned about what you're going to play next. The creature that's hitting them, like, you swung in with a 4/4 that had an enter the battlefield trigger. So it's doing 4 damage. It's significant. It's something that they're seriously considering, and they're looking at paying removal for. But realistically, in the overall game, if you're playing a lot of creatures, a 4/4 with an enter the battlefield trigger, well, the enter the battlefield trigger's already happened. At this point, it's just a 4/4. That's what you're destroying. Is that really worth it for them? When it's coming at them, suddenly the threat assessment goes off, and they say, yes, that is important. You've just drawn out that removal spell while holding your creature that you know that they would use the removal spell on. It's just, it's one more reason why holding the card till the last possible moment sees a big benefit.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously with taking that further, if the creature has, say, flash, obviously doing it on player 4's turn, whoever is to the right of you, especially during or before their end step, kind of prevents it from any of the possible board wipes that could have happened through. And I mean, like this, I mean, we can get into the minutia of all the possibilities that can happen when you play creatures earlier than you should have.
The nice part about a creature with flash and playing it at the end of your opponent's turn, you've left your mana up the whole time. And generally speaking, if you've left that much mana open that you can play, say, a 5-mana creature, then everybody there is expecting that you have something, that you're planning on playing it. especially if you have a reasonable poker face. Now, if you got 5 mana up and you flip the cards onto the table and just say go, there's a good chance maybe you're demonstrating pretty clearly that you just don't have anything.
I feel attacked, Bruce. I feel like you're talking about me, and I'm right here as if you're talking about me like I'm not even in the room.
Say for example, just any person. Let's just call him Andy.
Exactly.
But it just, you leave that open, and you're always leaving that question. So now they're thinking, okay, do I attack him? Is it a flash creature that he has, or does he have a counter spell, or
removal?
Does he have removal or whatever? They don't know, and they won't know until it's too late for them to do anything about it.
Right.
Because you've held that card up representing it as anything, and you've held the mana up saying I could even play it.
Yeah.
And then you play it out. So the best move there was to play it late. The other nice part is maybe you are getting attacked. In which case, waiting until your opponent's end step is ridiculous.
Right.
Especially if you're planning to use it to block. It's
right.
Like, surprise,
and obviously
I've changed combat.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, like, obviously there's situations. Yeah. Like you're reading when is the last possible second to play this. And if you're holding it up to block with your flash creature, then yeah, you're going to do it after attacks are declared.
Right.
And kind of along the same lines, like you're saying, your opponents see that you're holding up X mana.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. You can use it for a counter, you can use it for removal, you can use it for a blocker. Maybe you have something on the board already that has an activation cost, and you're holding it up for that. And now you have that choice of bluffing having something in hand, or, you really have something in hand, and people are like, oh, he's just going to use Karn's Bastion to proliferate. That's all he's doing. But he's just bluffing. And then, you're really weeding out either people attacking you, like maybe it is representative of a threat against whatever they attack you with. So now they're not going to attack you. And all because you didn't play that creature on your turn. And obviously there are examples of why you would play it on your turn, even though it has flash, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, I mean, this is a general statement about flash creatures.
Right.
There was something else I was going to say. I forgot what it was. But yeah, I mean, whether it's creatures or any sort of big play, you are immediately, with big plays, you're immediately painting a target on yourself. No matter how big it is, you're doing it with the intent to further your game at the cost of others. And so people are going to react negatively by attacking you, by removing your stuff, whatever. And so having the right moment is always a tricky thing to find when doing the big things, because you don't want to be hosed.
Right.
So it's like, you want to find the right moment to play, I don't know, Ruinous Ultimatum, where you've got this sweet spot of like other people's permanents on board and you can get in for whatever. You don't want to just play your board wipe just to elongate the game, because then people are just going to kill you, because you just did that so that you survived. And like, I don't know, it's always a tough call to figure out like the right, but whether it's with something with flash, instant speed, whatever, it does open your horizons a little of when you can do that, but there is still like an ideal time. And even if it gets back to just before your turn, maybe playing that flash creature isn't ideal now. Like maybe I found myself in plenty of spots where I'm like, I could play this right before my turn starts, but I know that like, give it 2 more turns, Right.
The big issue with that becomes, you didn't use your mana.
Yeah.
So you have to balance holding the card longer, which is, as we say, in the, with everything else unknown, it's better to hold off for as long as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And that could mean into another turn. But do keep in mind that every turn you hold up the mana and don't
Mm-hmm.
use it is a turn when you threw away that mana. And more we're finding that games are won by the people who tap out, who play all of their mana effectively as much as possible, because in the end you're casting more spells at generally a higher cost, which means you should be getting more bang for your cost. If that's the case, then you don't want to spend too many turns holding up mana, threatening something, and then never actually casting it. So keep in mind there is a cost to just not doing anything. You are burning that mana. So if you've got another card in hand that you're not playing because you want to be able to play this one and you're holding it, how many turns are you holding it for? Because that 5 mana creature, you hold it for 3 turns and don't play anything. It costs you 15 mana.
Right. And I think with that too, it's very much, the classic inventory optimizer Resident Evil. In Resident Evil, you've got not only a number of slots, but you've got shapes of your items, and you want to figure out how it fits nicely into, in this case, your mana. You've got 15 mana on board. You've tapped 10 of it. You've got 5 up for the next round. If you've got ways on board to sink that mana in, great. Helix Pinnacle is the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah.
But even things where you put in mana, get card draw. You hold it up in case you need to do the counter or the flash creature. And if you don't do it, then you're not wasting that mana. Sure. You're not wasting that mana. You're just using it differently than you would have. And I don't want to get too into counters and removal just yet. Maybe after the break, we can talk about interaction and when to use that. But with respect to big plays, a lot of the balance of using your mana and essentially making your cards cost more is something people take for granted. And I think that I'm one of those people who would rather sit on something until I know it's safe, but I also know that in turn is slowing the game down.
Right.
If everybody just waits until the coast is clear, either they're gonna lose or they're just wasting everybody's time.
Right. Something else to look at as far as encouraging you to play your creatures a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
Just the volume. If everybody...
Like this?
Not quite. If everybody has 2 creatures on the board,
mm-hmm.
and you play a third, now everybody has to assume that if you attack with all 3, they have to take damage. So what ends up happening is a lot of players will then play that third card. So you're encouraging them to play out the cards. Now, sometimes you're doing this in an effort to try and draw people into playing out more cards because you've got the Wrath or you've got a board wipe in hand and you want to make it more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Other times it's you're just looking to outnumber them. Right. You want to get ahead. So you can, so that's an option to consider when you're looking at when to play the creature. The other time is when you've got 5 creatures on the board, nobody else has more than 2. Do you really need to play that 6th?
Right.
Because then you're starting to walk right into that Wrath or into that board wipe or that Cyclonic Rift that you just can't stand. You're creating a situation where you're forcing them to do it, and you're the one who's going to take the major hit.
Yeah, and I think that's why I've never found a token deck that has worked for me, is because when I see the big play, I just want to do it. I just want to do it so bad. And I make 20 tokens, and then I pass to the next person, and they're just nope. Because, that's what everybody's looking for in a game of Magic is the most return on investment on their
Value.
cards. Yeah, value. Of like, oh my god, my Wrath of God took out 30 creatures. Granted, 25 of them were Andes, but like, that's a big play. Like, getting rid of all of the tokens I just made is like devastating to me. And what I find frustrating, and maybe this is a topic for another episode, so maybe I'll write it down. Hey, editing Andy, write this down. But like, say I make 25 tokens. Maybe they're just 1/1s, but it's like a big enough presence that like people take notice. They get Wrath the next turn, and I'm shit out of luck. But the thing that I've noticed is that once you make a big play, people are onto you. Making a big play and then having it go south, people will still stay on you until they see another target, or they'll just stay on you till you're dead.
Well, and you just hit on the next reason why you really want to hold off, or the best time to play your spell. You play your spell in response to somebody else. It's like, oh my goodness, we got to stop that guy. Clunk, here comes my big creature. No, my big creature is just there to stop him.
Right.
You don't have to worry about taking out my creature. That creature's the threat. We all saw it. It was the threat, right? Now mine is the bigger creature. It's probably should be the threat to all of you. But I'm just playing this to stop his big creature.
Yeah.
His creature's the threat. And it's amazing how well that works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the thing that I have such a hard time with again, with token strategies is like, I want, it's like the turnaround on doing the big play to winning is so short, or it like the possibility is so short, like because otherwise people will catch on and you're out of luck. And it's all about timing, where like making that buttload of tokens to then attack with, it either has to be a little oppressive from the start, where like, people can't get underneath it to dismantle it immediately, or it just crumbles quickly. So like holding that March of Multitudes until your second to last play is key, because doing the big play sometimes tattoos a target onto you.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a fault of bad playing on their part. They saw that you can be a threat out of nowhere, and they don't want to let that happen again, even if you know that they just dismantled your whole deck.
Part of the key there is, when you're going for it, is make it happen fast. I went through this with Buzzbark. Buzzbark is another deck that spends a lot of time getting the big play set up, and then has to wait a turn until all the creatures can attack. And that just wasn't working. So now there's a lot of ways to give all of my creatures haste. So that way when I play out those 8 token creatures and then immediately follow it up with Buzzbark, or, whatever combination, I can attack immediately. So I know that I can at least get one swing in. And a lot of times just getting that swing, you point it in the right direction, and suddenly the person who was going to counter it doesn't feel like, or counter it or destroy it, doesn't feel the need to do that because, oh, he's going over there. So I've minimized the number of opponents who actually want it gone.
Yeah. Speaking of opponents who want it gone, sometimes you're that player. Sometimes you're like, you've got a murder in hand, or you've got route.
Me?
Sometimes you've got route and 8 mana open. Is that what route at instant speed is? No, 7. 5 and 2.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've got that route open, and sometimes you don't want to play it. We'll talk about when to hold and when to play your interaction after we get back from this break. Let's throw it over to our sponsors.
This episode of Temple of False Pod is brought to you by Kenny Rogers. Because nobody knows when to hold them and when to fold them quite like Kenny.
Wow. Is he the same as Kenny G?
No. I do have a hankering for some fried chicken, though. Kenny Rogers has a fried chicken chain.
Didn't know that.
There we go.
Okay. Obviously, this episode we're talking about holding cards, not just playing everything you can all of the time at any given moment. Patience, I guess, but also not wasting the moment. Because the reason I thought about this was because so often when playing Commander, it's so easy to counter the commander. And we've talked about this before on the show where it's like, it's kind of crappy. Especially, we've got now cards that for a fact in the card making room. In R&D, they have made cards in the past couple of years that, like, even though they're standard legal cards that do something with any standard set, have also been thought of with regards to Commander. Say Dranith Magistrate. You can't players can't play, or your opponents can't play things from not their hand, something like that. So nobody can play their commander except for you. Wash Up, I think it's called Wash Up or Wash Away. It's a single blue counter spell. If it targets a spell cast from not their hand, or it has cleave for, I think it's cancel. It's 2 and a blue, or 1
it's
and
Wash
2 blue.
Away.
Wash Away, great.
Yeah, counter target spell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand.
Right, you can for a single blue mana, you can counter somebody's commander, which I'm gonna take a moment to just be frustrated with this concept where people think it's ideal to do this, which sometimes it is. But when it's at any given opportunity that they've got the mana up, then it's like, just let me have my commander. Just that's, you counter literally anything else. Just like, if the deck is built in so that it is unique to the commander, let the commander happen. I don't know. Like, there's obviously certain times that I wouldn't even consider not countering the commander, but like, if I had the counter, obviously. But I feel like, as a general rule, like, it's just so frustrating to, like, it ruins the game of Commander. I don't know. This is just me on my soapbox. Let me get down. So the last half of the show, I just kind of wanted to talk about holding counters, holding removal. Like I said earlier, like route. You can play route for 2 extra mana at instant speed. But I really like touching on the ideas that you brought up earlier in the episode of, like, what if somebody's not coming after you? What if somebody plays something big and your first instinct is to counter it, but they're not willing to share this information with you necessarily of, oh, I'm not going to go after you, Bruce, with it, at least not right now, so please don't kill it. The
difficulty and the idea is you want to hang on to your cards and hang on to your spells for as long as possible. That's the general theme.
Yeah.
This is why I'm not a big fan of counter spells in Commander. Do I want to counter the spell, or do I want to just get rid of the card? Now, obviously, if it's an instant counter spells counter everything.
Right.
Everything, any spell that's getting played. And removal, generally you have to target it, or you have to target a permanent. Maybe the spell's not even a permanent. So I get why people play counter spells, because you can deal with everything. The difficulty is when you're running the counter spell,
Yeah, the
you
window's
have
so
to
small.
use it when the card's being played. And it may not be coming at you, but you don't know.
Right.
You don't know. So you have to then decide, am I doing this now? Which means not only that, you also have to make sure that that mana is always available.
Right.
I talked about keeping 5 open for a flash creature and having to do it for turn after turn. When you're running a counter spell, you need to keep that mana open for many turns, because you're not necessarily going to counter something in that first round.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you probably shouldn't be countering something in that first round, because maybe the worst thing is going to come up later. And if you're sitting on one counter, you don't want to burn it on something that was useless.
Right.
So it really, really, you really have to know.
Yeah, what are the chances that you pulled the counter spell off the top of your library at the exact moment that you needed it? Like that's kind of what you have to think about in the next round that you after you drew it.
Right.
And like, sure, maybe you're running enough counter spells that like maybe ultimately it doesn't matter. But like, you're also interfering with other people's play strategies, and you're interfering with the ultimate benefit of the table of like, all right, like, is this actually a threat, or is this just a big thing that I could, like, it is a thing that I can counter. Is it a thing that I should counter?
Well, then this is the problem. Like, looking at, say, okay, just to be basic, looking at a creature. Andy plays a creature. I have the counter spell. Do I play the counter? Well, is the creature a threat to me? At this point, I don't know. Maybe it's going to come at me. Maybe it'll come at me later. The difficulty with the counter spell is that by playing it, you're also saving your other opponents, the other 2 players, how much damage.
Right.
That's a creature they could have lost if they had to block, or life totals that they could have lost if you hadn't played the counter. This is why I prefer the removal spell so much more. The ability to have... you can keep your removal up and just use it when they attack you. Again, that removal spell gets to wait until the last second. The counter spell can't wait any longer. It has to be used when the person is playing the spell. The removal spell doesn't. It can wait until that person's attacking you, and then you can use it.
Yeah.
So it becomes a case of, which card do you prefer? So I tend to prefer removal over counter spells, but yes, I mean, that leaves me vulnerable to instants and sorceries.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think that, like, I think one of my favorite cards that, when did this come out? Okay, that's come out in the past couple of years, was from Core Set 2020, which, like, balances nicely that need for counters, but also need for removal, where it's like, all right, like, I've got a small window where I can counter something, or, especially in multiplayer, if I can wait and have it do damage to other people, like you were saying, maybe I can get rid of it later, is Aether Gust. For 1 and a blue, it's an instant. Says, choose target spell or permanent. That's red or green, which is a lot of them. Obviously, it doesn't cover all your bases, but its owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library. So, like, there's a 25-cent uncommon. And sure, the owner of the spell or permanent gets to choose if it goes on the top or the bottom, but, like, it may be the delay that you need, but you can also, like, it can either interact with something on the stack or interact with something that's already on the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, you're talking about essentially either you're getting a bounce spell that prevents them from drawing a card, or you're getting a removal spell.
Right.
It's one or the other. Because, I mean, if it goes on the top of their library, they're going to draw that card again. It means they didn't draw anything else. So they in effect don't get a draw. Or they can put it on the bottom of their library, meaning they're never going to see it again.
Unless you're playing Grenzo.
But they're never going to see it again, and they get to draw their cards. So, but they get to choose. Well, I mean, that's a lousy choice to have to make.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just, you're wanting to hold. I'm trying to think of times when you don't. Like I said, with the counterspell, you have to have it at that moment. It has to be there at that moment. There are other times when you might want to play it early, but those are, that becomes conditional plays. Like what's happening with your board state. Is the person, if you've got removal, are they attacking somebody else, but that other person is an ally or has something that you don't want to see gone? They're going to block with a creature and you're thinking, no, I want that creature to swing at him.
Right. Or
like
something like, there's so many creatures nowadays that are like, when it deals combat damage, X. Like, even if it's not coming at you, it's a great time to use your removal.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you can counter it before it gets to the battlefield. But that's another great example of, like, needing to do it in the moment. Of, like, not even consider... Like, I mean, obviously you should consider the other possibilities that they're just baiting out your counter.
Mm-hmm.
We were playing a game... where you were playing your Krond deck. It was a two-headed giant game. And it was clear that your team was going to attack my team. And you played out Krond.
Yeah.
And my teammate had a counter spell.
Yeah.
And he was like, should I counter it? I was like, no, wait for the enchantment. Because even if Krond, attacks at some point, they could be attacking the other team, but also like, sure, when it attacks us, it only matters. I mean, sure, it's 6 points, but is it a 6/6?
Yeah.
Sure, it's only 6 points, but unless he's enchanted, it's only 6 points.
Right.
If he's enchanted and then he attacks, then there's bigger costs to pay. But otherwise, it just let him have the 6/6.
Well, and even there, like, this is another example. Mm-hmm. I remember that game, and I intentionally played Krond, and then I put an enchantment on Krond. I put an aura on Krond, and it was some minor aura that really didn't do anything other than activate Krond's ability to remove a permanent, and it wouldn't change the outcome of the game, because this game was going to end before any of this could play a pivotal role. Mm-hmm. It wasn't going to affect the outcome. So nobody countered anything. And I did this solely to draw out a counter in the hopes that someone would play the counter, because I knew the next card I was going to play was the one that could change the battlefield, that could change the outcome. So I was trying to draw out the counter, and that's why I played it then, not because I thought that I could definitely have waited another turn, but then it was going to be too late. So I felt like I had to do this here and now and bait the counter. Yeah. Because waiting another turn just meant there was a better chance you were going to have a second counter. So I tried to bait the counter, didn't get it with Krond, tried to bait it out with the aura, still didn't get it, and then had no choice but to play the big card and just hope that they just didn't have it.
Right.
And, I mean, we all knew they did. We all knew you guys did, but there was nothing that could be done. It had to happen.
It kind of just goes to show that, like, you kind of just need to pay attention when you're playing. Especially if you're playing things at instant speed.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been like, I mean, that wasn't a dig at you, I'm sorry.
No.
There have definitely been games where I've been screwed out of pizza because I've just been waiting on these instant speed things.
Well, right. And So just so everyone at home understands, when we play, most of the Magic that we play is at my house, and I regularly will throw a couple pizzas in the oven for everybody, and at some point I'll announce that pizza's ready, and that's usually enough to get everybody, other than the person whose turn it is, to get up and go get some pizza and come back. The difficulty is that if you're the one who's holding up the instance, when you leave, you don't get the right to back somebody up back through their entire turn. You left. That's the assumption, is that you got nothing.
Yeah.
And that you're prepared to deal with whatever it is when you get back. So
I was not prepared.
Right. I will say, I have when we're playing, I have changed the deck I'm going to play because I haven't brought the pizza out yet. Because I knew that I was going to be checking the oven a couple times, putting the pizza in the oven, checking again, going back to get it, going back to slice it, and then getting some pizza.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to be away from the table often enough, so I avoided a deck which was going to involve me spending a lot of time making sure that I can respond to everybody's cards. Save it for the next game when I knew I could be sitting there the entire time.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing too for me, is that I'm not upset that I missed pizza that one time.
Right.
And I think that generally the thing that you have to keep in mind about these games is that if you are a part of a regular play group, these games will happen. And even if you're not, there will be another game.
Yeah.
And if you miss your opportunity to do something because you were waiting for them to attack you or whatever, that's fine. There'll be another game. Been listening to a lot of Commander Cookout, and on their 300th episode, they were talking about how certain games are just flash in the pan, it's just a moment, they're fleeting. So if you have a bad game, there'll be another game.
Yep.
And so it's kind of this two-sided sword, double-edged sword. There we go. It's this double-edged sword of oh sure, you want to play out the cards that you have, but also you want to have this communal experience with everybody, and sometimes you get to play the villain, which sometimes is fun, sometimes that's what you want, but also you need to keep in mind just because it wasn't the perfect time to play said removal, whether it's permanent removal or counter, don't worry about it. Just learn from it. Do it better next time, or don't, and play another game.
One thing I definitely want to include before we wind up, because I know we're getting closer to the end here, but while we've been pushing the idea of holding your cards towards the last chance to play it, if you are somebody like me who I don't play a lot of instants, so a lot of times I don't have a response on somebody else's turn. Maybe it's stuff on the battlefield, maybe I've got a trigger that I can do, or whatever. A lot of times when I do have a response, I'll forget to play it. And I'll let stuff happen. Okay, one, if you're one of those people, pay more attention.
Right.
I mean, you just, you can't be throwing it away like that. But number two, if you know that this is the kind of person you are, then, when you do remember and you say to yourself, this is probably not the most optimal time. Well, maybe it is the most optimal time because this is going to be the best time for you to play it of all the times you remember to play it. So just do it.
So often on my own turn, I'll be like, all right, I'll hold up mana for this instant. And I'm like, all right, that'll be a great thing to respond with. And then I get to the end of my turn, and I'm like, I didn't hold up any mana. It's just I somehow, it left my mind immediately as soon as I was like, all right.
Right.
What am I going to actually do on my turn?
Or I'll have a flash creature in hand, Be like, perfect. I've held up the 5 mana that I need for it. On that person, on Andy's end step, I'm going to look brilliant. I'm going to tap my land. I'm going to play that flash creature. I'm going to get the enter the battlefield trigger. It's going to be awesome. And then Andy says, go. And I say, okay. And I untap and draw my card. And then I look at my hand and say, why didn't I do this?
Yeah. And I think in line with that too, like there are certain things you want to like activate, before your turn. Like say you've got Arch of Erasca where it's like tap 5 and this, draw a card. Sure, you're tapping 6 things, whatever. If you aren't the type of person to generally counter something, like me, don't hold up the counter mana. Like, if you know you're going to forget to do that, to draw a card, maybe just do it, like, when you remember. And I mean, like, don't do that every time. Like, maybe sometimes you do want to either bluff or hold up, like, I don't know, heroic intervention type of thing. Something that's going to save you. But that's, you've got cases that you definitely want to hold that mana up.
Right. And other times, like Arch of Erasca, Sensei's Defining Top, when you've got an activated ability on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. And you take your dice or your token, you put it on top of your library, and you just look at everybody and it's like, yeah, I don't want to forget my Arch trigger at the end.
Right.
Right? But it's not for the Arch trigger. It's for the card you've got in hand. All you have to do is remember to look at that stupid
that you
token.
Just lied to them. Yeah.
And, okay, now I'm going to do that.
Right.
So when you do that, everybody thinks it's for the Arch trigger. They don't know that you're actually reminding yourself to actually do something else, but it makes it easier that way. As opposed to putting a token on the card and saying, yeah, it's just for something I have in my hand.
Right.
That I want to do at the end of the turn.
Yeah.
So now everybody knows something's coming. They should have a pretty good idea anyway. But now it's like, this is rock solid. Something's happening.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. This is a complicated game, Bruce.
You bet.
You never told me that. I'm 4 years in now, and it's too late to get out.
Well, that's why I didn't tell you right off.
That's fair. That's going to do it for us today. We're going to go play a weekend of magic and fun. And maybe I'll take a nap before everybody shows up.
You got 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you all so much for listening to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. Sure as heck are fun. Sure as heck is fun. Sure as heck. Sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Thank you again for listening. Like, comment, share, subscribe, whatever. I don't know. And may your 5th land be the temple.
Bye!
Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter @falsepodmtg. Bruce is @manaburned, and I'm @AndyWeekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your 5th land be the temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!